I don't know of a jurisdiction in the world that recognizes same-sex marriage.
She's saying that gays and lesbians don't have constitutional rights, don't have charter rights, that we don't fall in love, that we don't bleed, that we don't have emotions.
Tonight on Between the Lines, is the Canadian family becoming an endangered species? Good evening and welcome to Between the Lines. I'm Steve Paiken. If you spent any time at all watching the U.S. election, you couldn't help but notice the conservative agenda. George Bush and Dan Quayle fighting long and hard under the banner of family values. Pro-life, pro-family, anti-homosexuality, those are all the foundations of the kind of country the U.S. wants. And what about Canada? Well, tonight we're going to meet the man who is trying to bring the concern for family values to Canada. William Gairdner has written 2 books about how to save this country. In his latest, The War Against the Family, he blames schools, the government, even the churches and the courts for the failure of Canadian families. Families that now come in all sizes, shapes, and colors. This is a story about 2 very different groups of people. The first, Alan and Trudy Massard, and their 2 boys, Daniel and Anthony. Both of the Massards are bus drivers. The family lives in a nice suburban neighborhood in Scarborough, Ontario. The other, Debbie Douglas and Gabrielle Micallef, their daughter Siobhan, and their godchildren who live down the street. They know they are not traditional, but they also call themselves a family.
There have been many civilizations that have gone down, that have declined and have lost their greatness, and it's all been due to blatant promiscuity and homosexuality, and we don't want this to happen to our society. So we want the best for our children, and so it's very important for us to fight for the family unit.
Oh, wow. Look at that.
What you seem to be saying is, as the family goes, so society as a whole goes.
Exactly, and this is why I think that we shouldn't give up, and although we may sound square or whatever anybody wants to call us, or homophobic, which really is an incorrect use of the word. We don't have an irrational fear of homosexuals. But, you know, we don't agree with what they're doing because it is wrong. It's not natural.
Gabrielle Micallef says there's nothing unnatural about her relationship with Debbie Douglas.
Shake and bake.
Shake and bake.
Yahoo!
Typical family meal.
You're getting everybody angry. You're a lesbian couple, you're an interracial couple, probably interreligious, although I'm not sure.
Yes, we are.
Yes?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You're raising a child. Do you think the life that you are leading is normal?
Yes, it's normal for us. This is
That's
who we
right.
are.
Not normal for you. I mean normal, period.
It's normal.
Yes.
Yes. How do we know?
What defines a healthy lesbian
We've
family?
been together for 8 years. We have a brilliant together, very social child.
That's right.
You know, our careers have taken off. We have a good home life. So I think we have a healthy family life.
Mm-hmm.
Douglas and Micallef don't just live together, they also work together. They're documentary filmmakers presenting feminist themes. Their latest film is about violence against women.
I can see it on your face.
The other couple that we spoke to firmly believes that the family in Canada is under attack. Do you believe that?
No, I believe that what has been called the normal family is people are now seeing that there are different kinds of families. I think there is a move away from seeing male, female, 2.5 children as somehow being better than anything else.
One of the main institutions in society that William Gairdner blames for the disintegration of the Canadian family is the school system. He says that the values they preach are all wrong from the earliest ages, especially on the issue of sex. And on that score, the Massard family agrees.
It seems to me that, you know, they're teaching it's okay to be, you know, promiscuous.
They're teaching this?
They're saying, well, what they're saying is, you know, it's okay to have fun and, you know, go out with another guy. Just make sure you take the pill or make sure you wear your condom. And, you know, some schools are even handing out condoms. And this is not what I want my child to learn.
It promotes a gay lifestyle.
It does promote a gay lifestyle.
How do you know?
Well, I have had a look at the curriculum, and it's very pro-gay. It's very anti-therapy. It comes out and says that you cannot change if you are homosexual, and we know that that is wrong. There are many homosexuals who have changed.
People who hold more traditional views insist that the school curriculum is promoting promiscuity and glorifying the so-called gay lifestyle.
I disagree with that. I don't think it's doing that. I think what it's trying to do is balance the information that already exists out there, which is very negative, you know, about lesbians and gays and about lesbian and gay families.
Our daughter is one example that there are children who live in families like this, who are children of lesbians or children of gay men who are in the school system. And I feel that as a parent who is a taxpayer, then my child has the right to get information about her life just as much as everybody else.
Psychologists have done studies to show that children ideally need the two parents in order to become balanced. Yes.
So it isn't true. Most gay people I know have heterosexual parents.
Yes.
Sexuality isn't passed on, you know, it's something you are.
But you know, though, if Siobhan turns out to be a lesbian, you know, the psychologists and the so-called pro-family types are going to have a field day with this situation.
Oh, I'm sure they will. But, you know, chances are Siobhan will turn out to be heterosexual. I don't think, as a parents, we control our children's sexuality.
Yeah.
You know if she's gay or straight?
She's probably straight.
Disappointed?
No. We're not surprised. Most people in the world seem to be straight. This is a nicer wedding picture. It's a Muslim wedding. This is our friend who's getting married.
I see. Look at this nice family. Who are these people?
This is Gabrielle's brother, Rico, and his wife, Gay, and their daughter, Amy. They actually have another daughter.
See, now, Gabrielle,
Megan.
why couldn't you do this? Make life simple.
I did do that.
That's what
the
we
only
look
difference
like.
is I'm not wearing a suit.
They look alike, see? This is my daughter. This is her most recent school photograph.
You're not a second mother, though. She's only got one mother, right?
Well, but I am a mother.
Yep.
I can't be a father because I'm not a man, so of course I'm a mother.
But she's got a mother.
Now she's
has
got
two.
two.
Is that how you think of
She's
it?
got two parents.
Yep. And that's how,
She's got two parents.
Yeah.
Does she have two mothers?
yeah, Gabrielle is introduced as her co-mother.
Yep.
Love, trust, and commitment. A commitment to taking care of each other and to going through life together. And I think those are the important things that make up a family, much more so than the sex of one of the partners.
Yeah.
For Alan Massard, overnight bus driver, that's not enough.
When you see kids of 12 and 13-year-olds at 3 o'clock in the morning who are so drunk they can't stand up, okay, wandering the streets of the city, and I tell you, I see it, not every night, but almost every night, I begin to wonder, well, you know, something's broken down.
It would just be easier to get back down to basics and just, you know, live your life in a good moral way. Because once you start becoming liberal and saying, oh, anything goes, it's okay to do this, it's okay to do that, that's where you're opening the door for problems. And that's why so many people today have problems.
So, what are those problems? What is the war being waged against the family? And for that matter, what is a family? Well, we are joined, of course, by William Gairdner, the author of The War Against the Family. We're also joined tonight by a group of people who, if there is a war, live their lives on the front lines of that conflict. Teachers, parents, theologians, people on both sides of the battle lines. Okay, here we go. 600 plus pages.
Yes, sir.
You got a lot to say, I guess, right? 600 plus pages of a war against the family, and I guess I got to know for starters, who's involved in this conspiracy to destroy the Canadian family?
Well, first of all, you notice I never use the word conspiracy in the book. A conspiracy requires a conductor. In Canada, we don't have a conductor, but everyone's playing from the same music. There's a difference.
By accident, you're saying?
Yeah, and I'd like to start off, if I could, by, and I think it's an important framework for this discussion, which is what I hope we're having, however heated it might become, by giving your viewers the facts on the family in Canada. And the facts on the family in Canada are quite surprising, and they are these from StatsCan itself in July of '92. Fully 77.2% of all Canadian families are, in fact, married mother, father, child families. 77.2%. Okay, about 10% of all Canadian families are common law, maybe 10.5%. And about 11.5% are single-parent families, or what we call lone parent families. We had more lone parent families in 1930 than we have today.
All right, point being?
The point being that the family is embattled, but far from finished. And a lot of what we are hearing in the media today about the family changing, about the family being gone, is in fact an ideological effort to persuade the public that the family is a weakened institution and is no longer like it used to be, therefore anything goes. In fact, Canadians are overwhelmingly choosing to live in the traditional Ozzie and Harriet family form.
Well, then who's waging this war against the family?
Well, that's a good question, because when I chose the title for the book, The War Against the Family, I myself thought it was too aggressive. I have to tell you now that after writing the book, I feel it was too timid, because there has in fact been a 2,000-year-long anti-family tradition in the West, ever since Plato up through Rousseau, through the Marxists in the 19th century, right up to modern radical feminists.
1992. Who is it today?
Well, all the radical groups I mentioned in my book. There's 19 chapters.
93, I should say. Forgive me.
93.
It's the new year.
Yeah, sure. Well, you can see it in radical educationists who are, in fact, attempting to imbue our children in the schools, especially through sex education today, which is far from what most parents think it is or thought it was. Through radical feminist movements, which are vitriolically anti-family. Most women do not think of themselves as radical, by the way, but the radical feminists are self-consciously radical. The radical homosexual movement is very much anti-family and is doing its utmost to, and I think quite successfully, to dilute or dissolve traditional family categories in society. The radical abortion movement, euthanasia movement, there are radicals all through the court system in Canada in particular.
The church?
Yes, the church.
The
Liberalization of the church, yes. Yes,
the church is destroying the family? I thought the church was keeping the family together.
I think that's what the church ought to be doing, and I don't think it is. I think it's lost its market share over the last 30 years, and in order to fill the pews, I think it's become fashion conscious, and it's pretty much grasped onto a lot of the fashionable left liberal issues in the Western world, which seem to be predominant on the agenda, and so the church has not escaped that.
Daycare activists?
Well, you have to understand that daycare is part of the radical feminist program. For equalize,
say that again?
Is part of the radical feminist program. The
ordinary
ideology,
daycare that people need?
Let me finish. You asked the question.
All right, go ahead.
What I mean to say is this. The radical feminist agenda is based upon the idea that men and women are treated differently by society, even though they are the same. In other words, the notion is that they're the same biologically, except for the small fact that women actually bear the children. But women are handicapped in the marketplace because they have to raise the children and tend to do that more so than men who tend to run from it rather than towards it. And so the way you equalize men and women in society is you provide universal daycare for everyone who wants it, rich or poor. It doesn't matter. It's not a welfare program. It's a universal daycare program. So need is not an aspect of this. It's an ideological program to free women from their biological role in society. And that's why I say it's part of the radical feminist movement.
Is that part of a war, though?
Well, it is in the sense
I don't hear people using the word war and daycare in the same sentence when they talk about the family.
Well, if you read Plato's Republic, you see that what Plato saw, and by the way, I don't mean to get too academic about it, but Plato was the first to really see and coherently argue that the reason societies break down is because we have differences, and differences cause strife. And when he looked around and asked himself what the major engine of differences was in society, he saw that it was the family. Because some families are rich, some are poor, some own property, some don't, some are smart, some are stupid, some work hard, some are lazy, and so on. Differences create strife. Societies rise and fall. They break down. How are you going to make society utopian, egalitarian, and the same for all? The only way to do it is to remove differences. And so what he said was, let's remove the family, abolish marriage, raise the children by the state, and so on. And we have feminists today like Mary Jo Bain at Wellesley College just 2 years ago who said we will never have equality in society until we take the children away from their parents and raise them by the state. So there we have Plato and drag.
That's surely not a mainstream view, though.
Well, I said it's a radical feminist view.
But how pervasive is radical feminism in this society, in your opinion?
In the sense that they're quite dominant in the media, writing the textbooks, controlling much of the curriculum in the schools. I would say far more dominant than they ought to be. Most Canadians don't believe that, don't like it, and don't want it. But Canada has never been a country which has evolved according to what the people wanted. We know that by now.
Tell me more about the schools, because is it your view that schools, I mean, we hear this in Toronto all the time, because so-called radical feminists are charged, or so-called lefties are charged with running the school system, but are you saying everywhere in this country or everywhere in this province there are school trustees who are doing an injustice to the family?
No, I think that there are lots of good public schools and lots of good public school teachers. We know that. Like I said, there's no conductor, but there's a lot of similar sheet music. You read my book, so you know that there's some devastating stuff in education in that book. The chapter called Looking After Their Souls, which is about moral values education and sex ed, is particularly telling, I think, because if you've read the few chapters before that, the one on Sweden in particular, what you will see is this. The Swedes, who were a model for Canada in terms of social engineering and changing society from a traditional format to an egalitarian format, they quickly saw what Abraham Lincoln saw, which is that the philosophy of the schoolroom in one generation is the philosophy of the government in the next. If you want to change the philosophy of the government and the people, you've got to change the minds of the kids. So what they said was, what's the most powerful emotion people have, kids have? It's sex, sexuality. The family is a sexual institution. They wanted to divest the control and the authority of the parents over their kids. So the Swedes specifically targeted the privacy of the family. If we can divest the parents of their authority over the kids and win the allegiance of the children on such an important matter as sexuality, then we can win their allegiance on anything we tell them. And that was the thinking behind it. Now, no one is standing up in Canada and saying that, but believe me, they stood up in Sweden and said it. In Canada, we are doing it in a more helter-skelter, piecemeal fashion. I
have a bunch of folks out here who probably can't wait to get into this, and let me start with Bob Couchman. This guy has, Mr. Gairdner, spent his life studying families, and I guess I want to know, for starters, is his definition of family correct?
Well, if you read the book very carefully, I think...
which you have,
Bill,
right?
Yes. From chapter to chapter, you define the family as a legally married couple with children. You talked a bit earlier about family. As you know, 16% of people don't live in families, they're singles. So you take the 84% of people...
Not 16, 11%. 11.
Well, recent StatsCan data that came out...
Let's not worry about the numbers. What's the point? What's the point?
In any event, I think what you've done is you've narrowly defined the family.
Too narrowly, in your opinion?
Oh, very narrowly defined the family. And that concerns me a great deal, because I think we have to look at family more by the functions that they perform. And we saw some of those functions on the screen. Both those families perform those functions fairly well from the look of it.
Isn't that the case, Mr. Gairdner?
Well, how can I judge? I mean, it's a setup. I mean, it's an interview with
but the question exists.
Handpicked families.
His definition, families performing functions, that's the definition of a family. Does
No,
that not work for you?
it's not the definition of a family at all. It's a definition of a group. It's a loosely defined, it's based on a function. I mean, the Hells Angels could qualify.
No, I think
they love each other. They have fun. They're together for a weekend. You know.
Fine, but I think we could get caught here in semantics. But I think if you look at what a family is, and your family would fulfill this obligation as well. Children are born into a family. They're nurtured and loved within a family. The family is economically an interdependent unit. There's a lot of care that goes on between the partners within the family. Yeah. They're sustained over time, so it can't be just a couple that meet and have a quick affair. There's mutual sexuality within the family. How are you going to decide whether they do that or not, Bob? Pardon?
How are you going to tell whether they do that or not? If they have no legal commitment to society.
Well, I'm not suggesting. I'm just trying to set the format for the functions that a family performs. Because I think if you start defining a family by a legally constituted narrow framework, then you exclude. You're not inclusive.
What's wrong with
families.
his definition?
Well, what's wrong is that Canadians aren't doing it. 77% are, in fact, legally married mother, father, child families. We had more single families in the 30s than we have today. Canadians are massively opting for the legal married family form. We have more common law couples than we had 30 years ago, by 3% or so. And this I see as a trend which I am concerned about, because people are avoiding marriage. They're avoiding marriage, they're avoiding child rearing, and we have more single individuals living in Canada today, alone in households, like 20% or something.
Back here in the cheap seats, let me introduce you to a common law situation. Michael Leshner gained a lot of attention recently because he took a case to court.
And won.
And won. You won spousal benefits. You are in a gay relationship, have been for what, 11 years? Is that right? 11 years. Are you a family?
Absolutely, and the difficulty I have with Mr. Gairdner, I'm a practicing lawyer or a prosecutor. The legal framework anyone can buy a piece of paper. What goes on privately, the other lawyers on the panel can tell you, can often be very contradictory to what you're depicting as being the legal structure. What I had difficulty understanding in your description is that you keep using the word radical feminists or radical homosexuals. It's your mantra. It's the typical right-wing political attack, the politics of demonology. It used to be blacks, it used to be Jews, or Hindus hate Muslims, Muslims hate Hindus. We go around and around in circles.
All right, Michael, let me let him answer that charge.
Well, this is the typical left-wing mantra. I am not a radical myself, you see, but I know
everyone else is.
No, hold on.
You're the plain-speaking vox populi. Everything coming from your mouth is moderate, well thought out. You throw a little Plato in, a little Hegel. You stew the pot, and you put it up to a boil, and you want your people to think, let's blame it on the Jews. Let's blame it on the feminists. Let's blame it on the homosexuals.
Michael, the average homosexual is not radical and is not stirring for the kinds of changes that radical homosexuals are stirring for. They're not trying to bring down traditional society. They just
Am I a radical homosexual?
I'm not accusing you of that. I don't know.
I won spousal pensions for my lover.
Well,
what's the difference? We've lived together 8 years. We're in a dependent relationship. What is the difference between my relationship and yours? I understand you've been divorced once. I've never been divorced.
Yes.
I'm in a longer, sustained, committed relationship. I can't get the piece of paper that you say is the only legal distinction between your relationship and mine.
Well, I think we happen to live in a heterosexual society. All of human society is primordially heterosexual. That is the natural human form of procreation.
In a Christian society.
No, it's not.
Sorry, Mike.
No, it's not. How can you relate Christianity to biology?
Let's try back here for a second. Anis Hietapaka, and I got it right, and I'm so proud of myself. Had a legal career, gave it up, decided to stay home, raised 3 kids. Am I getting close here? I'm doing okay. Is he right on, or is there some room for Michael's definition of the family and where you come from?
Well, I think a family consists of a mother and a father and children, and that's the basis of humanity, if you will. We're here to procreate and create civilizations and live together. I'm not denying that homosexuals cannot fall in love and come together in a relationship, but I don't call that relationship a family. I don't necessarily call a man and a woman who are married with no children a family. They are a couple who are married.
Well, that's interesting. So even husband and wife who may at some point in the future have a family or have children, they're not a family yet.
No, I agree.
Yet.
I agree with her.
You agree with
it's a marriage, and I agree with what she said about Michael and his lover. They may have a fine relationship, maybe wonderful, maybe the most beautiful relationship in the world, but I don't think it's a family, and it's certainly not a marriage. And all I'm saying is that in a free society like our own, in which society is a collection of institutions, really, which are by nature exclusive. They say, take a vow. They say there's a moral hierarchy in this institution. Either you're in it or you're not.
Well, let me try this. Is this woman, are you a family, Lynn Simpson? You are a single mother.
Mm-hmm.
You and Joshua, is that a family?
I think it's a family, yes. Mm-hmm.
What does Gairdner think?
Well, I don't want to diminish her relationship or put myself in the position of saying there's something wrong with it. I think she has a broken family. I have never talked to a single-parent couple. I've never talked to a single-parent family, a single-parent parent, and asked this question and gotten
a Freudian slip. I heard
and gotten a negative answer. Whenever I say, don't you agree that it would be better for your children if you had a loving and supportive father and mother in this family, they always say yes. And what I've been saying in my book is that this is the model for our society, and we have to have an optimal model, or else we slide into some kind of strange oblivion in which anything goes.
Hang on a second, Michael. Let's hear some of Lynn's story if we can here. You intended, when you had your child, to have that so-called traditional family setting for him, isn't that right?
Yes, it was a supportive male, female, and we had a son. I will agree with you that it is a broken family right now. The only issue I have with that is that now that it has become a broken family, it's wrong. And I think when you get into that kind
I'm
of...
not saying it's wrong.
Well...
I'm saying it's not the optimal model. It's a broken family.
It's a feeling I get from you, is that it's wrong. And
Well,
I think that is where a lot of problems come in, is that when we live in this, when we set up these kind of belief systems, there's always a group, a sex, or something that is wrong. And as long as we continue to operate under that, no one is free.
Well, I think there are good, better, and best in society, if you like. Don't
Which
call
one
it
does she fall
right
into?
or wrong. Say good, better, best. You have a good relationship. I think you could have a better one if you had a supportive husband for your children. And I think you would probably agree with me. If you had the kind of person of your dreams, that triangle, that eternal triangle, which is a mother, father, child triangle, is the best one for children. And I think society has been created to protect and nurture children, not to protect and nurture married couples.
Can't do any shows around here unless you get lawyers on. We got one here. Hello, Mr. Wilson. What do you think so far? You're one of the people accused of supporting and working for, I guess, the forces in society which are destabilizing the family, according to Mr. Gairdner.
Well, I think that the intellectual rigor that's required is not to go back to Ozzie and Harriet, but to go forward. And anybody who has this is an illusion, the idea that Ozzie and Harriet was a happy family and created happy children. I mean, we have a remarkable degree of abuse that comes from your so-called proper family.
No, it doesn't. It comes from
abuse.
human beings.
Well, it comes from human beings, but it comes from human beings within certain defined models that you want people to cling to, where a father plays a certain role and a mother plays a certain role. And what I have discovered in my own practice and what I have discovered myself as a parent is that I'll have a lot healthier children if they see a father who has a lot of mother in him.
I should just say your specialty is family law.
And they'll have a mother who's a much better view of women generally and of themselves and their male and female within themselves if they don't get so tied down to the kind of defined roles that you want. That is the notion of the father who does certain things and the notion of the mother who does certain things. And what you create is the illusion of this family that existed in the 50s. You know, it's, as a very bad analogy, it's like, you know, hockey was great when there were 6 teams.
Well,
you know,
first of all, why am I creating it? If it's in fact what more than 3/4 of Canadians are in fact voluntarily choosing. No, even those who get out of their marriages remarry as quick as they can.
No, but because forget the stats, forget the data. What you're creating and what you're promoting is the notion that there is one family, that there is a notion of father, that there is a notion of mother. Well, why is it optimum? It isn't optimum if the statistics reveal that this family that you say is perfect has a tremendous amount of problems with it. It creates a remarkable degree of repression, a great amount of angry women walk into my office every day because they've done exactly what you wanted them to do. They've been the Harriets.
You're seeing the worst of it, okay? Granted, I'm not in your office. However, I would suggest to you, if you look at the sociology of violence in the world, if you want to pick on that topic, you will find that the societies in the world which have the least violence between the members of that society are those in which you have the strongest family values. Look at Jewish society in Canada. Very strong family values, very low violence. Look at Japanese families, very strong family values, very low violence. And the same is true all over the world.
Whoops.
Satisfied people necessarily?
Well,
are
it's
you
not your job or mine to
that?
go into their families and ask them if they're satisfied.
No, but are you going to make that judgment? You see, once someone starts making a judgment about what the right family is and how people are supposed to live, where does it stop, Mr. Gairdner? What's going to be your next judgment?
Look, I think the jobs that society set themselves are to create an order for within which the citizens are happy to live. An order, not blissfully happily, not perfection. I'm not assuming for a moment that human beings are perfect, far from it. But I think that societies are orders which help them to live their lives. The family order is the one I am passionate to promote because I think it's the only one left which protects us, in particular, from the wiles of the state, which of course has in its interest the breakdown of this family form. Okay?
Why does a family other than the conventional family, why does a gay couple family, a single parent family, lead to any greater disorder? Why does it lead to any greater disorder than the Ozzie and Harriet family? Well, that has to be the thesis of what you're saying.
Well,
here.
are you supposing that we should set up as an optimal model for our children a gay couple family? Is that an optimal model for you?
It's not a question whether it's optimal or not.
Yes, it is.
It's a matter of free choice. No, people can choose what they want to live. Do I feel that because there is a gay couple that we're going to stop procreating?
If
No.
it's a matter of free choice, then why don't we just ask ourselves what Canadians are choosing? And I'm telling you that what they're choosing is the traditional family model.
Yeah, so fine, so let them choose. But why? But what I'm saying to you is why I don't understand the book. Okay, I don't understand why it is that you make the assertion that in order to have greater law and order in society, or to have a better society, we need to have Aussie and Harriet families versus homosexual families versus single-parent families versus a family when there's 6 people, a native reservation, whatever you might call the family.
Let me give you an example, okay, just to get the hornet stirring here. I think that our whole tradition, the whole Judeo-Christian tradition of the Western world has labored extensively to try to teach us the difference between good love and bad love, for one thing. I had a homosexual call me on a radio program and said, but my partner and I love each other. And I said, love is not a sufficient warrant for marriage. It may be happy, it may be love, it may be a nice relationship, but it's not a sufficient warrant for marriage. He said, why? And I said, because there's a difference between good love and bad love. For example, self-love is bad love.
Okay, but tell me where the
Let me
where you want to go back to my
love of
my
money is
assertion.
bad love.
Tell me how,
Sexual love of
but
little
I want you to
boys is
answer the
bad love.
question. Why, how is society, how is there less order in society by reason of your concern that we won't have Aussie and Harriet families? That's what I want to know. Because what you're saying is, if you don't have Aussie and Harriet families, if you have gay relationships, single parents, different kinds of families, there's going to be anarchy or a breakdown in our general values. I want to know how that is.
Well, I think the burden of proof is on you to tell me why society is breaking down like it is, rather than me to show you the reverse. The fact is we have increasing chaos, increasing crime, increasing illegitimate... Excuse me? May I finish?
You're discriminating against us.
Hang on, Michael, I got the microphone. No one can hear you yet.
Hold
Go
on.
ahead.
Gays and lesbians are not asking for laws discriminating against you. If the family, Aussie and Harriet family, is as wonderful as you say, then let the intrinsic values that you say speak for themselves speak for themselves. Why do you need to attack and prescribe legislation? Why do you need to build a wonderful institution?
Is he attacking?
How am I attacking?
Of course. It's
Michael,
all
why
what
would I
I
attack?
told you. Look at the demons. Look, we're under attack.
Michael,
it used
how
to
have
be
I attacked?
Jews
How have I
and
attacked?
blacks.
Okay,
now
hang on.
it's
Let's hear
women.
it. Go ahead.
A lesbian mother said this to me in the first show on this book. She said, you're imposing your views on me. And I said, I'm not. I'm not forcing you to marry a man. I'm simply saying that unless you do marry a man, you cannot have the privileges of a married heterosexual couple in a heterosexual society. We are all embarked on a procreative project. Without it, we would not exist.
Okay, back
That's
here, Mr.
clear.
Gairdner. Let's talk about one of your favorite subjects, education.
Yeah.
We got an honest-to-goodness trustee from the Toronto Board of Ed here, which, as you all know, is responsible for this city going to hell, right? And it's all your fault, Tim. That's what we want to find out. Is he right? Is he right about, you know, he's accusing you of teaching promiscuity and promoting homosexuality in the curriculum, in the courses. Does he have a point?
Well, I had a chance to just look at very briefly to the chapters that deal with the schools on moral value education and sex education. I honestly have to say that a lot of the examples that you give in your book are so unfamiliar to me that I really don't know whether the school that my children go to is the same kind of school that you were talking about. Because certainly for my own children, I don't think that they're receiving an education in the school that is destroying the very family that we're all living in. One thing that you mentioned in your book is about the lack of shared values that we're teaching our kids and all that. I think in a complex society like Canada, with people from so many different backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds, cultural and racial backgrounds and all that, it is very important that we teach our kids some shared values, and that's exactly what we're doing. We're teaching the value of cooperation. We're teaching how important it is that we have no tolerance for violence, any kind of discrimination, and we teach the kids respect.
Let me try a
real
question
respect.
here, Tim. What's in the curriculum specifically that you object to or that you feel promotes promiscuity or promotes the homosexual lifestyle?
Well, you read my chapter. I can't quote it to you verbatim, but there are all kinds of selections in the chapter.
Some of the folks at home might not have read the book yet.
Look at Wardell Pomeroy's books, Boys and Sex, Girls and Sex. I mean,
what are kids learning in school today that promotes homosexuality or promotes promiscuity?
I won't go so far as to say that all the schools are standing up and saying, you know, it's better to be a homosexual than to be a heterosexual. But there's a kind of moral equivalence being preached in the schools, that homosexual life is as good a choice as heterosexual life. I went to Richmond Heights, Bayview Heights Secondary School in Richmond Hill. I asked for a for family studies textbook. I leaf through the first one. It's got a chapter on marriage, right? What does it say? There are many forms of marriage. Open marriage, homosexual marriage, group marriage, oh yes, traditional marriage.
Is he right, first of all? Is that true?
This is not, no, that's
I'm
not,
sorry.
certainly I have, my kids are in the system, and I haven't really, honestly, come across a book that they've brought home describing just the content you're talking about.
Well, let's say, let's give you an, for argument's sake, let's say it is true. Is that a problem? Is that a problem if that is the case?
Well, I think what we're trying to encourage the students at school is to have an honest discussion about a lot of the issues that face them, both at home and in society. And what we're trying to teach is that there has to be an open process that everybody can respect, so that we can actually talk about it. When you have so many families that have been in, have different, do bring different values into Canada. In a sense, I don't know how the teacher in the classroom situation can really actually promote one value over another.
Do you know what? Let me talk to somebody here who
that is
believes...
that is the role of teachers throughout history.
Well,
to teach values.
Maybe not according to Sheila Morrison. Sheila, you run your own private school. You don't want the schools teaching values at all. You want that done at home, isn't it right?
Well, that's part of it, but I happen to agree with Dr. Gairdner, and I find that
Wait a sec. When did he become a doctor?
Well,
PhD.
PhD. Okay.
We were the original doctors. The others came afterwards.
Well, the thing is, I get calls, and I have parents from all across the province of Ontario, and I think everyone labors under the misapprehension that because Toronto is a hotbed of all this sort of stuff that Dr. Gairdner's talking about, that therefore it follows that it's all over the province. And I don't think it's all over the province at all. I think it certainly is happening in some schools. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind that he is right, absolutely. But it certainly is not happening in all the schools. But the other thing is, the parents must be very unhappy. There are 500 private schools in this province, and that tells you something. If it doesn't, it should.
Is there anything wrong with the public school system teaching values?
It depends on whose values, and I think this is the whole issue in a nutshell. They're not teaching the values that the parents expect them to teach.
Whose values are they teaching?
Their own, in very many cases. And I'm not saying anything about this. Has nothing to do with ethnicity at all. I think I got that out right properly.
Mm-hmm.
It has nothing to do with that at all, because I think most families want the best for their kids. And you want your family values. If you say it's not good to steal, you don't want them to go to school and have somebody say, well, it doesn't really matter, it's your decision.
I don't think anybody's arguing here that the schools are teaching kids that it's okay to steal, but they...
I haven't mind, don't tell, isn't. Never you mind that. I had a kid, my own kid was in a classroom.
Where they said it was okay to steal?
Where the kids were cheating. And he came home and said, last year the teacher said that would have been cheating. But this teacher said, you're supposed to help one another. It is happening. It is happening in some schools, in some teachers. Not all, by any means. But certainly there are some.
Does this happen in your schools?
No, not that I know of, really. And honestly, I think it's important to know that we do have a very healthy public education system, and a lot of the people are sending the kids to public school, and there are a lot of very good people trying to make the public system a very viable one, so that it will be a very useful institution.
Change course. Religion, as in losing my religion. That was the name of a hit song a while ago. Mr. Gillies, how responsible is religion for all of this? Attack against the family.
Yes, a loaded question, to say the
only
least.
kind I ask, I hope.
Yes,
anyway.
exactly.
The flock is watching.
Yes.
You're a United Church minister?
Yes, I am, and I do a fair amount of family and individual therapy.
I think he's accusing you of getting left, of getting soft on the tough values that he would like to see perpetuated in society.
Yeah, well, it feels like a straw person being set up to not be knocked down to me, I guess. I read the chapter carefully on the church and on religion, and I mean, it's a sociological analysis of what the church is up to. It's not a theological treatise, and obviously it wasn't intended to be, but it seems to me there's a lot of other questions that don't get addressed. I mean, one of the tasks of religion is to be prophetic. Sometimes I think they say, to be the church, you must encourage people to pray, and everything else you do is trendy leftist stuff. But the prophetic tradition is religious. It doesn't have to be politically left, but to be prophetic and say things that are difficult to hear is part of the religious tradition. And I would say, actually, I was thinking about it as we were talking, that one of the core theological truths of my tradition anyway is the message against idolatry. And in some ways, in your writing about the family, I think even maybe inadvertently, you're setting the family up as an idol. And it's one of the jobs of religion to knock down anything that's turned into an idol.
But you know
That's
as well as I do,
interesting
it's hardly a theological idol, or it's a structure. It's a social structure. And the point I make all through the book, and I think you're aware of that, is that societies have to have optimal models towards which they aim themselves, and they aim their children, and they aim the future.
But I guess the question is,
and
are you
if those
worshiping?
models break down, where are they going?
Are you worshiping at the altar of a, worshiping at the altar of the old-fashioned family of four?
I'm saying the whole world worships at that altar because no one escapes the eternal triangle of the Father. We're all born of a mother and begotten by a father. No one escapes that.
Jonathan Gairdner is with the Reformed Church. Where are you on this?
Oh, I'm glad you brought me in right now. I was kind of chomping at the bit, actually.
Chomp away.
Yeah, I'd like to go right into this. I mean, I think that, indeed, the family is not an idol. It's interesting when you mentioned the phrase using the word idolatry. That was, and I was thinking of with the standard verse in which homosexuality is accounted as a sin. It comes in the list right after idolatry. So I think, I think what we're talking about here is the family is a gift given from God. The family is been given to the society as a way of strengthening that society, and I think that Dr. Gairdner said a lot of very positive things there about what it does in shaping the family's moral values. But whether or not one is a Christian, of course, is relatively black and white. That, again, we would have to say that these other forms are not families because we cannot condone the morality of the actions involved.
Is there anything too black and white, to use your term, about his definition of family, or is it simply too exclusive, the way he's defining families today, and it's not appropriate for the times we live?
Well, to be honest, having heard his explanation here has been helpful as well too. We are well aware of that in the church that we're in the how can I say, we're called to bring people back to wholeness and to fullness. And so again, I think his point's well taken that again, when we see a broken family, we are there to try to offer wholeness, and we hope that it can be put back together again. So I mean, we certainly don't want to negate the fact that a single-parent family has a validity to it, albeit it's not the optimum, it's not God's plan. And I think that's the basic agreement. I would agree from my work as a pastor as well that I'd agree with the comment that was made that most people that I've had the privilege of working with that have been through the situation of being in the single-family situation would also thank God if there was a way that they could be a complete family again. But that does not negate, if God doesn't open that door, that there's still a that's a mean of grace as well.
Tell me this, though. Tell me this. Does that suggest that churches that prefer to be more inclusive, if I can put it that way, or maybe looser is the way you describe it, are they doing a disservice to the family? Are they in trouble?
Most importantly, they're doing a disservice to God, and that's even worse than doing a disservice to the family. But they're certainly doing both. I think that should be, made in a sense quite clear. I mean that if God has spoken, then we have to be faithful to what God has said.
I got to hear from Mr. Gillies on this one. Okay, you're on.
Well, we're sure on the opposite, so we're sitting opposite, and I
appropriately, you would
appropriately opposite. I couldn't.
You're not united.
We're not united on this, and.
Are you doing a disservice to God, as he suggests?
Well, I mean, in the Last Judgment, we will find out, to use our common language.
Nicely put.
And I think, au contraire, I think we're trying to be faithful to a God who does not want things reduced to black and white, for one thing. I mean, life is very ambiguous, and on this side of whatever lies beyond, it's all ambiguous. It's always gray, and we struggle to get a toehold. And I'm proud of my own church's connection with the pluralism we're talking about. I'm sure there are some trendy people who probably don't think very deeply about the position they take, but I think basically we are moving carefully toward a broader, actually what I would say is that where I think we'd all agree is that if you list some values, then I could agree. If you mean in a relationship there needs to be love and loyalty and all the other value words, then I would say a gay relationship could well embody those as much as a heterosexual one.
Yes, of course, but it's not a marriage.
Agree or disagree?
But we're talking about a family, and I like the...
No, you said relationship.
Well, I like the Ministry of Education's definition of a family better than yours at the
Ministry
moment.
of Education is famous for doggerel and double talk. My gosh.
Okay, speaking of villains, we got one more villain that you're going to want to talk to today, and you get the Patience of the Year award for hanging in there so long. Yes. Janet Davis, who lobbies for daycare.
Yes.
One of your favorite things, I know.
Long-term daycare is bad for children.
Agree or disagree?
First of all, no, I absolutely disagree. High-quality childcare is good for kids, and we could spend the rest of the program
It's an
arguing
oxymoron.
that. I don't want to...
It's oxymoronic. There's
actually
no such
don't
thing as
want to...
high-quality long-term daycare.
There is definitely high-quality childcare and lots of evidence to show that it has positive outcomes for children. I want to respond to a couple of things. First one being the Aussie and Harriet family you keep tossing around as 77% of the families. Aussie worked, Harriet stayed home. That is 18% of families in Canada today. That is not the traditional family that you're painting it to be. The majority of families must work, both of two-parent families must work or choose to work. That's the reality. And what we are saying, both in the women's movement, I want to respond to your, characterization of the women's movement. I happen to be, yeah, I guess I.
You got two reasons not to like
I
her
haven't
now,
read the book, but I presume I'm painted. I would
quoted
clearly be one of the radical feminists with a program to institutionalize children. No, what we have said is that women have a right to make choices about their lives, and we in the women's movement and the childcare movement, in fact, want women to be able to make the choice to have children. In fact, not having a good childcare system is probably inhibiting more women from having children than you want to acknowledge. The majority of families require childcare in a range of forms: part-time, full-time, in-home care, group care,
Can I just
family
ask you one
support
thing that you've raised
programs.
here? Do you agree that women should have more choices the way that Janet is describing here?
Well, look, first of all, choice is a bit of a red herring. All human beings have choice. The question is, can they get what they want by exercising that choice? Okay, let's separate the two things. Secondly, I want to address her comments on daycare. The fact is, whenever you poll Canadians, the Canadian population, let's talk about free Canadians speaking their minds, 66%, what the Globe and Mail CBC poll called an overwhelming majority, arguably it's overwhelming, rejected the idea of any kind of daycare for any long period of the day. And only 16% of Canadians have their kids in daycare for any period of the day.
The reason that only 16% of families have their children in childcare today is because it's either not available or they can't afford to use it.
You know why? Because the state is taking so many taxes. If they weren't taking the taxes, you'd have the money to raise your kids.
No, the reason that most families are working is because close to 70% of them would fall below the poverty line if they weren't working. The reality is that our economy is restructured, and you haven't even, I mean, I haven't read your book, but presumably you talk a bit about the economy and the fact that women's labor force participation is essential for our economy. And I think that the question is...
It's essential for the welfare state. The welfare state, whether Sweden or Canada, knows that you must have everybody working and paying taxes. And I find this a terrible thing, that women are being forced out of the home against their will for economic reasons, when the majority of them, when polled, say, when they're asked this question, would you rather be at home raising your kids than working, the majority say, I'd rather be at home raising my kids.
Can I just ask that back here? Because, Anise, you've done that. You put a career on hold because you wanted, presumably because you wanted to stay home and raise your kids, right? 3 of them.
Yes, although I must say that I continue to practice law at home. And I find that it's necessary economically, and it's really hard. And I think that I've tried various things. With my oldest daughter, we had somebody coming in for a while. That was nice. Somebody came into my home. I was home. It was great. For a couple of days a week, and I was able to work.
Is that okay? Live-in nanny's okay and all that kind of stuff?
It wasn't a live-in nanny. It was a student who came in to help me. That's,
you know,
I was being the mom.
I don't want to interfere in anybody's private life. It's their business what they do.
This is what I was able to do, and I felt lucky to be able to do it. I still practice. I have work all the time. I find that it's very difficult to find the kind of help that I think would be the best for me to keep me closely in touch with my children. I don't want somebody else to bring up my children. I had my oldest daughter in daycare for 3 months, and I'd go and pick her up very early in the day, and I'd go sit down in the sandbox with her and play. And I had all kinds of little children coming up to me, 2.5-year-old, 3-year-old children, and they just wanted to sit beside me. And
point being what?
The point being they weren't getting enough attention in the environment that they were in. And I thought, I don't want this environment for my child. And I brought her back home, and I continue to work from home and look after my children. I want to be there if it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon and something is happening. I know what their personality is like. I want to respond to them. I want to instill our values in my children, and I feel lucky I can do that. And I know all kinds of mothers and fathers
One of
who
them
are
sitting
really
beside
upset.
you who can't, I think. Right?
Yes,
You don't have
and
that choice, I
feel
assume?
terrible.
Yeah?
And
You don't have that
it's
choice.
awful.
No.
It's not fair.
I don't have that choice, but I only have one child, and I know that when he went to daycare at age 2.5, it was the best thing for him. I'm not going to have any more children. He will never. It was the best thing for him to have that social interaction.
Do you think it was because there's just one of you at home too? Does that make it more difficult that there's just one at home? I mean, I think that makes a great deal of difference when there's one person looking after a child, or one or the other. I don't. It makes it puts much more pressure on you.
Last word, you, Lynn, on this?
Yes,
Yeah.
it is much more difficult if there's,
Okay.
if there's only
Let
one.
me, if I can here, because we're running out of time. We've just got a few minutes left, and I want to pose sort of a final section here to Dr. Gairdner. Bill, okay. Humor me here for a second. We talked at the beginning of the program about George Bush and Dan Quayle and the so-called family values issues that the Republicans ran the last election on. And the Republicans, as you know, in the White House got clobbered in the last election. Some would suggest they raised the whole family values issue just to obscure or obfuscate what the real issues of the election were, which I gather were about the economy. What do you take from that? Do you see that you trying to bring the whole family values crusade here, and people frankly don't want to know about it? They want to know about other things that are, you know, the people in the state said, leave family values to us. We understand family values. Do something about the economy.
Well, first of all, I'm not sure that we, the people, heard what they, the people, really felt about family values. I think that whole thing got chewed up and spat out by the media. It was a political football, bounced back and forth, made to make everyone look as bad as they could. And personally, I didn't care for the politicization of the family value agenda. My concern is that every time you ask Americans, every time you ask Canadians, a clear, simple question about families, and look at the polls in my book. They're clear, page 156. There's 2 pages of them. Overwhelmingly strong support for the Aussie and Harriet, I hate the term, the traditional family.
That makes up, according to Janet, 17% of the country?
She's quite wrong. It's 77% of the family.
No, what she's saying is...
Father breadwinner, mother
Yes.
at home.
Yeah, okay, so it works.
18% of families in Canada. That is not the
Look,
that is not the family.
I agree, and
described.
first of all, 58% of Canadian women between the ages of 25 and 44 work outside the home. It's 58%. Stats can't figure it. Trust me. The problem is this. All moms are working moms. My difficulty is that as the state intrudes upon the family and offers its services in exchange for taxes, the family bonds are smashed. Women have to go out to work because they can't afford to stay at home. This is the tragedy.
What's going to happen to Canada if we don't listen to you and all of these things that you're against tonight prevail?
Read the charts on the war against the family. You know, we have 22% childbirth out of wedlock now, so-called non-marital birth. That's what Sweden had 20 years ago. Now they have 50%. We're going to be 50% 20 years
What does
from
that
now.
mean? What's going to happen to this country if
Well,
we
you
don't
get
do what you
you get
say?
an underclass, you get rising crime, you get massive demands upon the system, you get a state that's out of control because it's in such terrible debt it cannot afford to provide the services that it has promised.
I take exception. The birth rate amongst teenagers in Canada has been consistently dropping. In your book, you quote
That's because they're
American
resorting
statistics.
to abortion.
In your book, you
Nothing to
allude
do
to the
with,
fact that pregnancy amongst teenagers is increasing in Canada. This is not true.
I said pregnancy, not
Yes.
birth. Pregnancy is increasing. Birth is not because they're running for abortions, paid for by you and me, whether we agree or not.
Jeffrey Wilson.
One could argue that what you're arguing, sir, is that everybody liked Ozzie and Harriet. It was a very good program. Okay, that's fine. Everybody liked it. But I haven't heard you yet tell me or explain to me why the clients that I serve are not simply a skewed sampling, were necessarily any less happy or more happy than the Ozzie and Harriets.
Look.
I could argue to you and persuade you, or I would attempt to persuade you, that the Ozzie and Harriet in reality was not a very happy place.
Look, I think family breakdown is good for your business, so you're arguing for it.
Steve.
Go ahead. I saw you wanted to get in, Mr.
Yeah,
Commissioner.
I was just saying, too, I think the whole issue of religion, I do think needs to come back here slightly, and I think that, you know, we talked earlier about the issue of theology here. This gentleman may not be a theologian, but his book was very perceptive in the point that he used the phrase Gnosticism he used the phrase, I mean, that really what we're talking about going on in the struggle for the family in the church right now is a struggle between Christian principles and non-Christian principles. We've reached the stage, are there absolute right and wrongs? And if we can only see grays, we're no longer part of religion at all. And see, I think the point that I'd like to piggyback on this, we're going to fall, not just as the family going to fall apart, but we're going to see a radical redivision of the church coming up, that we're going to find those who are committed to core Christianity, those who are committed to standing for family values are growing. Those churches are growing.
Okay,
the churches that don't are declining rapidly.
One of the Greys back here wants to address this. Go ahead.
Well, again, the issue of religion, I mean, let's have onward Christian soldiers in the background. We see what's happening in Bosnia and Herzegovina. It's ridiculous. No one's talked about the Charter of Rights yet. The fact of life is, go on. Be a happy Christian, be a happy Jew, be a happy Muslim, be a happy Hindu, be a happy Aussie and Harriet. All we're saying, those supposedly on the left, is we're all taxpayers. We're all Canadian citizens. My constitutional rights are my
Okay, Michael,
birthright.
forgive me for cutting you short. We've got 30 seconds left for me to ask you. Do you honestly believe this stuff, or are you just trying to promote some discussion in this country?
I want to respond to that.
I got 30 seconds.
I'll give you 20. I want to respond to that. The Charter of Rights and all sorts of charters, such as the Charter of Rights, are being aggressively and successfully used by people like yourself to destructure traditional society. They are about individual rights. They are not about society's rights. Society is going to be disassembled in the name of individuals. We will have no society.
Do you really believe what you're saying, or are you A, trying to just simply promote some discussion in this country, or B, just trying to sell books? Which is not a bad thing either.
I absolutely believe in what I'm saying, and if that sells books, I think it's because people support it.
That's all the time we've got. Thank you very much. Our thanks tonight to William Gairdner, the author of The War Against the Family, and many thanks as well to our extended panel for their participation tonight. Please join us next week when we look at Bill Clinton's America. Will the new Camelot and the optimism last, or will President Clinton just be the newest sacrifice to American governmental gridlock? Does the U.S. government still work? Coming up on our next edition of Between the Lines. Now, if you have any comments or questions about tonight's program, we would love to hear from you, and there are many ways you can get in touch with us. Write us, won't you, at Between the Lines, in care of TV Ontario, Box 200, Station Q, Toronto, the postal code M4T2T1, or fax us at 416-484-4519, or call the answering machine. It's there for your toll-free calls at 1-800-668-1467. A few weeks ago, we looked at the Canadian economy. We asked whether Canada should spend its way out of the recession. And we leave you tonight with a few of your very interesting comments. I'm Steve Paiken. Thank you and good night.
All the executives that were on there tonight is a fine example, I think, of why our country is in trouble economically. And that the communications problem that was demonstrated there this evening with their not listening, talking without saying too much, and hollering back and forth at each other. Same sort of tactics that go on in the House of Commons.
I just want to say I found John Crispo's remarks brilliant.
I don't think this country is very technically oriented. You might say the people are technically illiterate, and it's maybe too late to change the situation around and make the country competitive. There's just not enough time, and there isn't enough political will to do this.
People don't mind paying tax if they're putting towards something that they feel is going to help the country. But I don't believe the majority of the people feel that their taxes are really helping the country.